Hey guys, welcome back to week 3 of our Organic Garden Basics series. Today we're going to talk about warm and cool season veggies, seeds versus transplants, seed storage, starting seeds indoors and outdoors, and which vegetables like which better, grow light basics, and hardening off your seedlings. So let's get started. If you guys are getting something out of this series, please let me know in the comments down below and consider giving the video a thumbs up. And remember, I'm going to be tacking on a 5th video to the end of this series that is going to compile all of the most popular questions, and I'm going to have a Q&A video. So anytime during this series, if you have questions, leave them down in the comments so I can answer them. So the first subject today is warm versus cool season vegetables. You got to know which are which, just so you know when to plant. Cool season vegetables can be started at 2 different times during the year in all but the shortest growing zones. And those 2 times of year are late summer, early fall, and late winter, early spring. So basically right now, and I won't get into the details of the late summer, early fall. We'll do another video on that in September or August, September. So just remember, especially if this is your first year, gardening is more than just summer crops. When summer's over, you still have a whole other season before winter. And in my opinion, it's the best season, or at least the easiest. Gardening in the cool season is actually easier because there's less heat. And less heat means less watering and less pests and diseases. Most of the cool season crops are frost tolerant, and they can even deal with a little bit of snow. Cool season crops include lettuce, peas, Asian greens, kale, carrots, beets, fava, or in Europe, broad beans, celery, radishes, spinach, rutabagas and turnips, cilantro, arugula, and all the brassicas like cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, and Brussels sprouts. That's a lot of variety. In fact, there's probably more variety in the cool season crops than you've got in the warm season. And warm season crops are tomatoes, peppers, corn, eggplant, okra, and beans, pumpkins and melons, cucumbers, and winter and summer squash. Now, there's a lot of confusion, especially among new gardeners, about winter and summer squash. Is one a cool season vegetable or is one a warm season? They're actually both warm season. They're grown in the summertime. Summer squash would be considered anything that has a soft skin, like a zucchini, yellow squash, that type of thing. A winter squash grows in the summer, but it has a hard skin that can be stored for the winter. So we're talking things like butternut squash, spaghetti squash, things like that, acorn squash. Warm season crops are generally started late winter, early spring, and usually indoors, and that gives them a longer growing period and a longer harvest. So they will grow and produce all summer long. So right now is a time in most climates where you can start your cool season crops if you want to. Just be aware, as I've mentioned in another video, that cool season crops will take at least 2 months of your growing space. So calculate that into when you're going to be starting your summer crops and make sure you've got enough time. Now, if you've got plenty of room, first of all, I'm jealous, but you can grow both at the same time. They can overlap at least. Your cool season ones will be finishing up as your warm season ones will be starting. And you can go to my website and download the planting worksheet if you haven't already, and that will tell you, first of all, what's cool and warm season, and it will also tell you when you can plant them, indoors and outdoors. All right, the next segment is on seeds versus transplants. Now, a big question I get a lot is it okay to not start from seed and to start from transplants from the garden center? And the answer is yes, it's totally okay. I start most of my crops from seed for a few reasons. Number one, variety. There is so much more variety that you can choose from when starting from seed. Take cucumbers, for instance. Your garden center may have 2 varieties of cucumber to grow, if you're lucky. The Baker Creek seed catalog has 26 varieties of cucumber that you can grow from seed. So there's a big difference there. You also know that if you're ordering seeds from a reputable organic company like Baker Creek, there's no affiliation. They probably don't even know I exist. Maybe they do. They know I order a lot. But you know that they are coming from organic sources, non-GMO sources. I trust where Baker Creek is getting their seeds. At the garden center, you may or may not know that. Now with transplants, you don't get that magic moment where the seed just breaks through the surface of your growing medium. Let me know in the comments if that is a magic moment for you, because I can tell you after 30 plus years of gardening, every single season, when I see those seeds sprouting, it just reminds me how amazing that is. This tiny little thing that has all the information it needs to grow and produce fruit and then to make seeds for the next generation. Now, the benefits of transplants is you don't have to baby them as much. You can get a plant that's well on its way, put it in the garden, and water and feed it, and it's probably going to do what it needs to do. You get a quicker crop from transplants. However, you can get the best of both worlds by, let's say you're planting lettuce and you have transplants of lettuce. Go ahead and plant those out, and at the same time sow some lettuce seed. That way you're going to have the crops producing at different times. You're going to get a jump start on your harvest by having the transplants, and then your lettuce, once those transplants have been eaten and they're done, your seeds are going to be ready to harvest. And if you want to keep every 2 weeks planting more of lettuce seed, then you're just going to extend that harvest on and on until it gets too hot in your area to grow lettuce. Now, if you choose to start from seed and you have a short growing season, or you just want to make the most of whatever growing season you have, then you're probably going to want to start those indoors in late winter or early spring if you're in a really cold winter. Now, there are a few crops, as a rule, that don't like to be disturbed once they're up and growing. So those should be planted directly in the garden. Now, rules are made to be broken, and I have broken a few of these and it worked just fine, but some I have not had good luck with. But as a rule, corn, beans, peas, members of the cucurbit family like squash and melons, they just want to be put in the ground and let alone. They don't want to have to be transplanted. Oh, root crops also, like carrots. Beets, I think, do okay. I've tried it with squash, and generally they do okay. They might get set back a couple of weeks, but in a matter of time, you can't tell the difference. However, last year, I had an experience with corn. I started some indoors for a video. I don't even remember why now, and then planted it out and planted it next to ones that I planted from seed directly in the ground. And those were so stunted, they grew so much slower. The seed ones actually bypassed them in height within probably 2 weeks of both of them being in the ground. And by the end of the season, the ones that I put directly in the ground, the seeds that I sowed directly in the ground, they had a much bigger harvest, much more robust plants. The other ones produced, but they were very small. The plants were very spindly. And because it was in my three sisters' garden, the beans just kind of took them down. So it never hurts to try. I'm always saying experiment, experiment, experiment. But if you try and fail, just know it wasn't your fault. All right, on to starting with grow lights. Now, this last Tuesday's video was about all the particulars about grow lights for every budget, so I'm not going to go into that again. I will link that video down below in the comments if you want to take a look. In this video, I'm going to cover once you've got your grow light picked out and set up and ready to go. Now, seeds don't typically need light to germinate, but once they germinate, as soon as that little head pokes out of the ground, they open up their seed leaves and they're like little solar panels and they're looking for sun. The seed itself carries enough energy to break open the seed, send a root down for moisture and nutrients, and send that little sprout up. After that, if it can't get its energy from the sun, it's going to fizzle out very quickly. So either keep checking on them and make sure when you see any kind of activity that you get those grow lights on, or if you know that on the packet the seed says it takes 7 to 10 days to germinate, when you're getting close to that 7th day, you really need to start looking. Or you can do what I do and just start the timer and get it going from the very beginning. And it's also going to give a little bit of heat, not too much if you're using LED, but it will give enough heat just to raise the ambient temperature in that area a little bit. Once the lights are on, the seeds are up, the lights need to stay on for 16 hours a day and then off for 8. And this is no matter what light you're using. A little tip, I don't know if your area is the same as mine. In my area, electricity is cheaper at night. So I run my lights from 5 o'clock p.m. to 9 o'clock a.m. And I just have a little timer to control it, because if I didn't, by day 2, I would have already forgotten. And remember, if you have the CFL or fluorescent shop light tubes, those need to be within 2 to 3 inches of the tops of the leaves at all times. So you need to raise the light as the plants grow, but not too much. You got to keep that minimum distance, because they're not as powerful as a actual grow light like the Mars Hydro that I showed in the last video. Those can be quite a distance from the leaves and still put out enough power to give all those seedlings what they need. If you don't have them close enough, you're going to notice your seedlings start to get leggy. And that's where their little necks from the soil to the leaves get really long, because they're stretching to try to get to that light. And in most cases, if your seedlings get leggy, there's really nothing you can do to save them, because they're not going to be able to stiffen up enough to support an entire growing plant. Tomatoes are the exception to this rule, because tomatoes, which we'll get into when we plant tomatoes, they actually grow roots all along their stems. So if you made a mistake and your tomatoes started getting leggy, you can just fill up some of the potting soil up toward the top of the seedling, and it'll grow roots all on there. So actually it's a plus, but you don't want them to get leggy, because that just starts them off on the wrong foot. So let them grow a little bit normally, and then fill the cup in with some soil to get those extra roots. Again, I'll go through that in a couple weeks when we plant tomatoes from seed. And once the seedlings are up and growing and they have their first true leaves, the first leaves that a seedling puts out immediately, those are their seed leaves. They're not true leaves. They almost all look the same. They're kind of rounded. The next set of leaves look like miniature versions of what the grown-up leaves look like. Those are the first true leaves. And once you see those, you can start fertilizing your seedlings with a general organic liquid fertilizer. Of course, I use Neptune's Harvest. But you want to do any fertilizer you're using, do half strength. These are babies. They don't want full strength. And you can do a half strength every couple of weeks. I do want to drop in something here, because I didn't mention it in the grow light video because it was about grow lights. But a seed mat helps immensely if you are growing, well, first of all, in cold. So if it's in a garage or somewhere that's not warm, like your house, or maybe if you just let your house get cold at night, like I do, you might want to invest in a heat mat. There are some, on my website, go to Products I Love, and you'll see what I use. But there's some that have thermostats and some that don't. I recommend one with a thermostat because you can control it, but they're a little more expensive. But go take a look. I used for years one that didn't have a thermostat, and I just put a towel or something between the heat mat and the seedling tray. But that's going to raise the temperature of the root zone enough to where it's going to stimulate faster germination, especially in heat lovers like peppers, tomato, eggplant. But generally, all of the warm season vegetables are going to benefit by having a heat mat in terms of speeding up the process. Once your last frost is past, it's time to start transitioning your seedlings, your little babies, out into the real world. But just like kids, you can't just send them on their way and hope they do a good job. You gotta really work them into it slowly. Hardening off is the process of acclimating your seedlings from being in this very controlled, safe environment out into the big, scary world. Now, this is done over the course of several days, or in just a minute, I'm going to talk about a shortcut. But in the traditional method, you would start to bring your seedlings outdoors very slowly, weather permitting. So the first day, they'd be in the shade for an hour or two, and then they go back inside. The second day, they're in the shade for maybe 3 hours, 4 hours. The next day, you're going to put them in the sun for maybe an hour, and then in the shade for 5 hours. The next day, 2 hours in the sun, 5 hours in the shade, or 6 hours in the shade. And slowly, you're building up the seedling's tolerance to the sun. A lot of people think you're doing this because of the cold or something, but while that's kind of an issue, it's really the sun. The seeds are not used to being in full sun power. And after about a week of this, your seedlings are perfectly fine to be set out into the garden wherever they need to be. Now remember, download that sheet on my website if you need it, but you need to know your last frost date, and then you need to look on that sheet to see if it's okay to put your seedlings out that early. So some are, you can do before your frost date, some are at your frost date, and some could be 2 to 4 weeks after your last frost date. So just make sure you know when you're hardening them off that it's actually time to harden them off. So what do you do if you're working, you have things during the day, and you don't have a babysitter that's responsible to take care of your little seedlings in terms of hardening them off and all those hours in the shade and sun and all of that? You want to look on your weather forecast, and you're looking for 3 overcast days coming up in the near future. And on those 3 overcast days, you're going to just put your seedlings out into the light. There shouldn't be any direct sun because it's overcast, right? You want to put it on a table or chair or something off the ground just to protect it from critters or pests or things like that. And during those 3 days of overcast weather, that is going to be enough to have them hardened off and ready to go out into the garden. So it's a little easier, less time consuming. That's the way I do it. As long as you have 3 overcast days. If not, then you got to go back to the old way. So just remember, it's mainly about sunlight and getting them used to that. If you've been inside all winter and you go out and sit in the sun all day, what's going to happen? You don't want that happening to your seedlings. Okay, so now I want to talk about seed storage. And there's really only 2 things you need to know about seed storage, and then you can get as creative as you want to with how you want to store your seeds. You just need to keep them cool and dry. Dry is the most important of the 2. So I have been storing my seeds like this for years, nothing fancy. Basically, I have a little envelope for each type. I have cool and warm. And then, so this is onions, this is other, flowers, cool season, tomatoes, roots, greens, peppers, herbs, squash, melons, beans, other. And I just put all of that in there so I can at least keep them straight. And if I know I want to plant onions, I just grab the onion one and pour them out and look and see what packets I have in there, which works fine. But I started getting a lot, and I wanted to, be able to see them a little bit better. And so I was just going to get a little more creative, nothing too crazy. And I found these, or Emily actually found these on Amazon, and they're little photo books. I think there's 40 pages in each, I can't remember. And what I like about these is they're the right size for a Baker Creek seed packet, which are kind of big. And I like that there was one on each page. Here, I'll show you. I put a few in here already. This would be the flower one. So you can see the front and the back of each seed packet, right? And then if I want flowers, and if you put them in alphabetical order or however you want to do it, you can have a book for flowers, you can have a book for onions, you can have a book for melons, you can have a book for whatever you want. So That's the way I'm going to start. I think I'm really going to like that. And it's kind of like it almost gets me excited like when I used to collect baseball cards, or if you're my age, Garbage Pail Kids. Like, this is the adult version of like sticker collecting in the 80s. So anyway, I'll leave a link to those on my website under products I love, and you can check those out if that's something you want to do. Okay, I think that covers everything for week 3. Next week, we're going to be sowing seeds together. So all the information we've talked about the last 3 weeks, get everything together. Next week, we'll plant together. If you haven't joined our new Facebook group, Next Level Gardeners, you are missing out. We are having so much fun over there. I can't believe all of the conversations that are going on over there. We have, I think, 13 or 1,400 members already, and I don't even know if we've been up a week. But the conversations are just flying. Everyone's participating. I'm jumping in there, and it's just a lot of fun. So if you want to join and you are on Facebook, Next Level Gardeners. I'll see you next time.